Welcome and good morning, all. My name is Santino. I'm the education coordinator for Bowman's Wildflower Preserve, and it is my pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to our 2023 annual meeting. So as we get started, I want to take a brief moment to recognize the Native folks who called the preserve land home prior to our existence on it. So Bowman's Wildflower Preserve encompasses part of the indigenous homelands of the Lenape people. We pay respect and honor the land's original inhabitants and acknowledge their displacement by European colonization. We are dedicated to being respectful and sustainable stewards of the preserve and to deepen our relationship with the Lenape people. Now, typically I ask if this is everyone's first Bowman's Wildflower Preserve program, but I assume that if you're joining our annual meeting, you've heard of us and know of us, but just a really quick intro to the preserve, and then we'll get things going and started. So we're founded in 1934. Two visionary individuals are to thank for that. Mary K. Perry, who is chairman of the Bucks County Federation of Women's Club, and W. Wilson Heintish, employed by the Pennsylvania Department of Forest and Waters. They met on our property, which was destined to become campground, and they imagined a sanctuary where people could enjoy Pennsylvania native plant splendor all year round, with native forests and fields of wildflowers and trails meandering through them all. After some very heavy championing in October of 1934, they got the commission to set aside a 100-acre portion of Washington Crossing Historic Park as a living memorial to the patriots of George Washington's army that were camped there during the Revolutionary War. If we fast forward to the 1950s, is when volunteer naturalists first began giving guided wildflower tours of the preserve. That's a tradition you can enjoy today during the growing season from April through October. We offer guided wildflower walks, and we encourage everyone to take part in those walks. Those are a free benefit to our members. And if you're not a member of the preserve, there's a small fee associated with that, but it's a small price to pay for having a docent guided walk through the preserve. If we continue, the 1960s is when our visitor center first got built, and it hasn't changed much since then. The 1970s, we became a nonprofit member-supported organization. So at this point, I take my hat off to all of our members and say thank you so much for everything that you do. We couldn't exist without your support. In the 1980s, we became the nation's only accredited botanical museum dedicated to native plants. So know that as you enjoy the preserve land, we, much like Metropolitan Museum of Art, Smithsonian, these other fine institutions, have that same museum accreditation. But our collection is not painting, artifacts, bones, or the like. It is the living and respiring collection of nearly 750 different native plant species, which is about 1/3 of all the native plants of Pennsylvania. Those are protected, of course, by our deer exclusion fence, which many of you will know that if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have those native plant species. So as we enjoy today's annual meeting, the chat feature is available for you all to talk amongst yourselves, as it were. Please feel free to use the Q&A tab. If you have questions for any of the folks speaking today, I'll be monitoring the Q&A tab for questions, and I'll be asking them on your behalf. Of course, great time to silence or turn off your cell phones. Restrooms, you know where they are located better than I do in your own home. If you have breakfast or another snack, please feel free to enjoy that as we jump into our 2023 annual meeting. And it's at this point, I'm going to turn myself off here and turn it over to Pete and Judy.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Judy Eady, the chair of the board of Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve. I am so glad that you could join us today for our 4th annual meeting via Zoom. Today, I'm looking forward to sharing with you our plans for 2024 and getting any comments or feedback that you might have. But before we get started, I wanted to quickly touch on the agenda for the meeting this morning. We have a lot to cover in the next 60 minutes. We're going to start out with our governance chair, Deborah Agnew, who will share with you the slate of officers for 2024. I will also then introduce you to our 6 new board members. I will thank and let you know the 6 board members that will be leaving at the end of 2023. I am also pleased to announce that we have an excellent guest speaker this morning, someone you are all very familiar with, Mary Anne Borge. We have a few other board updates. Next up will be our executive director, Pete Couchman. He will review 2023, provide a look forward at our 2024 annual plan, and share highlights of our 2024 budget. Then we have some board business. The board needs to vote to adopt the annual plan and the budget for 2024, and then we can adjourn. So with that, I'll thank you for joining. I look forward to your comments, and I'll turn it over to Pete.
Thank you, Judy, and welcome to everyone today. It's great to be here in front of you yet again. I can't believe this year has gone as quickly as it has. I'm sure most of you have, as Santino mentioned, been very familiar with the Preserve and have attended perhaps an annual meeting in the past. So we're very excited to share with you a look back from the previous year and a look ahead into the future of the great things to come for 2024. So Judy and I will be kind of covering that as we go through the meeting today. So with that, Judy, back to you, and we can move on to board business.
All right, if you want to go to the next slide, we'll turn it over to Deborah. She's going to cover the slate of officers. I guess it's the next one. There you go.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned in our previous meeting, this has been a very busy year for the Governance Committee. There's going to be a lot of turnover beginning 2024. We're losing our whole slate of officers that have taken us through some pretty tumultuous times, and we're out the other side stronger than ever. So it's very sad to see them go, but the good news is that we have a great new slate of officers coming in and some wonderful new board members who Judy's going to talk more about later. But for the moment, the new slate is Heidi Needleman as president, Lisa Hanover as vice president, Stephen Hall as treasurer, and Seth Saditsky as secretary. So are we going for a vote at this stage? No, that's
No.
just,
We already did that. Yes, we're good.
Okay. So that is the new slate that was voted in our previous meeting, and very much looking forward to moving onwards and upwards. It's a great team we have, and huge thanks to the outgoing officers. More about that later. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. Can we advance the slide? Thank you, Deborah. So with that, I would like to introduce you to our 6 new board members. Melissa Davis has joined the board this year, along with the 5 others, and she has agreed to head to be the committee chair for our newest committee meeting, which you'll find out committee that you'll find out a little bit more later. She's going to head our climate change and sustainability board committee. We have Gail Linenberg. She has joined again this year also, and she has agreed to co-chair the development committee with Jenny Rose Carey. We have Amy Mulby, who just joined this year, Denise Pencari, who has joined and has agreed to chair the collections committee. We have Deb Barry, who has agreed to chair the nursery committee. And starting in December, our newest board member will be Joel Cullimore. So he will join at the end of the year in time for the board social. Perfect timing from my perspective. So then the other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to recognize the 6 outgoing board members. Chris Holzner. So all of these board members have served a minimum of 6 years, some even more. So Chris has been on the board for 6 years. He's been the vice chair through since 2020. So you kind of have a perspective of what he's been doing. And he also is the chair of the property committee. Aveta Gigovia, she's been the treasurer and the chair of finance, and she's been on the board for 6 years as well. Then we have Andy Strauss, who likes odd numbers better than even. So he decided to stay on the board for 7 years. He's been the secretary, and he's also been the chair of the DCNR subcommittee. We have Julie Davies, who's been on for 6 years and has chaired the collections committee. We have Julia Klausner, the same 6 years, and she's chaired the marketing and communication committee. And then we have Pat Ludwig, who I'm not sure how many years it is, but I believe it's double digits. And her most recent thing for the last three years has been to, I guess it's 2.5 years, has been to chair the nursery committee. and she was my predecessor as far as she chaired the board prior to me. So if you go to the next slide, I think I'll turn it back to you, Santino, so that you can introduce our guest speaker, Mary Anne Borge.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Judy. And all right, so as Judy said, we are thrilled to be joined once again by Miss Mary Anne Borge, who is a naturalist, photographer, author, and educator. She is editor of Butterfly Gardener magazine, a naturalist and instructor here at Bowman Wildflower Reserve, and a Pennsylvania master naturalist. She's the team leader for Lambertville Goes Wild, a volunteer organization that successfully led Lambertville to certification as a community wildlife habitat by the National Wildlife Federation. And on her blog, she writes about and illustrates with her photography the importance of native plants to all life on this planet.
So I was asked to share a little bit about how I got interested in native plants and how my relationship with native plants has evolved over the years. So this is all about how I got to know native plants and what the journey has been like. Basically, I started out as a birder, and from birds, I got interested in plants because how could I not? Birds are always hanging around with plants. They're taking shelter, they're nesting, they're eating. So, you know, I needed to start to learn more about the plants that the birds were hanging out with. I actually bought my first field guide to wildflowers when I was on a business trip to Ithaca, New York. I was on a lunch break and I was walking through town and I glanced down and saw this little plant, which is not native, but it caught my eye. It was in somebody's lawn and I needed to know what it was. It's bird's foot trefoil, but at the time I didn't know the name. And I needed to know. So I walked into a nearby bookstore and bought my first field guide. It was an Audubon field guide to wildflowers. And it's been a continuous learning process since then. Photography has really helped me to learn a lot because I'm able to capture information with my camera that I can then carefully study later to figure out what I've been looking at, because it's not always obvious at first glance. I got interested enough and I started to have more time as my professional life wound down, and I attended naturalist training at Bowman Wildflower Preserve. And that experience was pivotal for me. At that time, the preserve's mission statement was that the mission of the preserve was to lead people to a greater appreciation of native plants, to an understanding of their importance to all life, and to a commitment to the preservation of a healthy and diverse natural world. That mission statement really resonated with me, and I really basically adopted it as my own, and it has guided a lot of my actions in the intervening years. One of the classes that was part of the core training for naturalists at that time was plant ecology, and in that class, we learned that plants are the basis for the food chain. They're the source of food, medicine, building materials, and so much else for all species, including humans. Through the process of photosynthesis, they're able to produce their own food. In the process of doing that, they produce oxygen for us while removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They also do a lot to mitigate stormwater management and help groundwater recharge. So I learned in the plant ecology class the importance of plants. And in fact, native plants that are native to any given area are essential because of the relationships between plants and animals. Most people by now know that monarch butterflies can't exist without milkweeds. They've got a really good publicity going on. A lot of people don't really know that it's the caterpillars that actually require the milkweeds. It's not the butterflies themselves. They'll drink nectar from pretty much anything. The woman who was the education coordinator at the time and who was teaching the Knowing Native Plants classes and the naturalist training emphasized the relationship between plants and insects and kind of taught us that butterflies are a good way to get people hooked. Most people can relate to butterflies. So if you can explain that these butterflies wouldn't exist without the plants that are native. That's really a good way to get people starting to understand why these plants are so important. Another example of a butterfly-plant relationship that's one of my personal favorites is Dutchman's pipe vine. It's a fabulous vine that can be used to cover fences, arbors, that sort of thing. And it is the caterpillar food plant, the required caterpillar food plant for this lovely butterfly, the pipevine swallowtail, who here, this female is in the process of laying her eggs. They're usually laid in a cluster like you see here. The caterpillars will eventually hatch from those eggs. They go through several growth stages and their appearance changes somewhat, but this is one of the caterpillars that's probably getting pretty close to ready to being to pupating, munching on a Dutchman's pipevine. So just another example. Why use native plants? A plant that's seemingly as tiny and insignificant as the bluets provide nectar to a host of various insects, various pollinators. All the 4 photographs that you see here of the insects, we have a butterfly, a moth, a fly, a bumblebee, all were feeding in one little cluster of bluets in a meadow that I saw in an early spring day. So even a plant with tiny little flowers, seemingly insignificant, really provides a lot of value to our native pollinators. So it's getting pretty well known that most butterflies and moths require certain food plants in order for their caterpillars to survive. And if the caterpillars don't survive, of course, there's no butterflies. It's somewhat less well known that bees in particular actually eat pollen. Pollen is such an important source of food for bees that actually only about 2% of pollen is used for pollination. The other 98% is used to pay off the pollinators. And here we have an example of a little mining bee who is a specialist on the pollen of trout lily, which is what we see in the picture. And she looks like she's munching on some pollen for herself, while she's also, if you can see her back legs, collecting some to take back to feed to her larva. So there are bees that are specialist bees, just like there are butterflies and moths that specialize on certain plants. There are bees that specialize in certain plants as well. So it's really important to have those plants that they depend on in order for their survival. Through naturalist training and through the years since, I've learned that if you pick just about any given species of plant, you'll find that it has a lot of different stories to tell. And one of my personal favorite species is wild senna, which is why I've chosen it as an example here today. This species has evolved to take advantage of the fact that bees have to eat a lot of pollen. That's a really important source of food for them, such that the flowers of wild senna, a pea family member, don't produce any nectar. However, the flowers have 2 sets of anthers with different types of pollen. So the higher set of anthers have sterile pollen. The lower set of anthers have fertile pollen. The sterile pollen can't be used to pollinate other flowers. It won't work. It's there specifically for food to entice pollinators like this bumblebee who's munching on the pollen from those sterile anthers, the anthers with the sterile pollen, while at the same time, her lower legs and abdomen are being dusted with pollen from the fertile anthers, the fertile pollen from the lower anthers. This bee, bumblebees and some other bees actually engage in something called buzz pollination, also called sonication, which sets up just enough of a vibration to have the pollen released from the anthers, dusting typically the underside of the pollinator. So wild senna doesn't bother to use its resources to produce nectar in its flowers because pollen's enough, but there's special pollen for paying off pollinators. However, wild senna has evolved to have these other special glands at the ends of the leaf petiole or stem. Those glands are referred to as extrafloral nectaries. Extrafloral because they are nectaries that are not part of the flowers, And in fact, they produce nectar. And we've got 3 different insects here drinking nectar from those little nectaries. Each of those, and so why would that plant do that? Why would a plant evolve to provide nectar in a location other than in a flower? Well, in this case, and typically when extrafloral nectars are provided, it's to entice other insects who would be potential predators of insects who would do more harm to the plant. So for example, we've got an ant, a wasp, and a lady beetle, all of which are potential predators of other insects. And in fact, here we've got evidence of that, an ant carrying off a caterpillar. Caterpillar could do a lot more damage to a plant. So wild senna uses these extrafloral nectaries to sort of entice a mercenary army to protect it. Wild senna also is a food plant for a couple of interesting butterflies, the sleepy orange and the cloudless sulfur. And I have a real affinity to the sleepy orange. It's a butterfly that was thought to not be able to survive winters further north than North Carolina until about 10 or 12 years ago, when we first reported the presence of the sleepy orange at the preserve in one of our annual butterfly counts to the North American Butterfly Association. And they were surprised to see that we actually had reproducing, we had a colony of sleepy oranges at the preserve. So it's pretty exciting that as the climate warms, this butterfly has sort of the opposite strategy of monarchs. At the end of the growing season, it heads north rather than south to see if it can expand its range. And sure enough, it's been able to do that because its caterpillar food plant is here. Without its caterpillar food plant, the butterfly couldn't establish itself. Cloudless sulfurs have a little bit broader range, but they have the same strategy of flying north. So it's really pretty exciting that as climate change occurs and the climate warms, we're positioned to be part of the reason that the sleepy orange can continue to do well and continue to expand its range. And if the name senna has sounded a little bit familiar to you, it could be because it actually is used as a laxative. So it's not by accident that plants produce chemicals that can sometimes be used for medicinal purposes for people or other animals. Typically, plants produce them to protect themselves. And in the case of wild senna, the laxative can be used to deter herbivores, for example, deer, from eating the plant to the ground. Now, as it happens, it also is useful as a medicine for people as a laxative. So that's just one example of all the stories that one species has to tell us. The buzz pollination that I mentioned earlier is a skill that's necessary, that's the most efficient way to pollinate crops like blueberries, cranberries, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants. And many of our native bee species have this athletic ability. Honeybees do not. So many of our native bee species are actually better pollinators than honeybees are. I began to use native plants even on my own property. I live in a townhouse development. I had begun to use native plants in our foundation beds, but we had sort of a shady lawn outside of our house. I realized grass wasn't going to grow in the shade. When it rained, it got really muddy and kind of ugly. The water, we had a lot of standing water. And we were able to get permission to plant native shade-loving plants in that area, even though it was common ground, not our own personal property. And we've not had a problem with that, with standing water and things like that ever since. So, and I like to think that the garden that we put in at one of the highest points of Lambertville actually helps the people downhill from us, the people with wells, because we're adding to groundwater recharge, and also the people at the lowest level of Lambertville, which are subject to flooding, flash flooding from the hillsides that we live on. So everything we do affects everybody else, affects our neighbors. We're all part of a community. I wanted to share the importance of native plants outside the preserve. I felt like I really wanted to push the message outside. So I initiated a project in Lambertville. Lambertville Goes Wild. Lambertville Goes Wild is a group of volunteers whose goal was really to teach people more about the importance of native plants to all life. And we used the certification as a community wildlife habitat through the National Wildlife Federation as our vehicle for that. Our mission statement is to enhance Lambertville's natural environment for all, large and small, through community education and engagement and promoting wildlife habitat. Native plants are essential. Some of the things we did, some of our accomplishments were that we did in fact certify Lambertville as a community wildlife habitat. It took us about 2 years to do that. Many residents have certified their gardens as wildlife habitats. We've managed to change ordinances in the city to include more native plants and to prohibit invasive species. Our education process was a mixture of things. We held native plant sales, various gardening programs, tree seedling giveaways, and most recently a green fair. We've planted gardens in the city parks and certified some school gardens as well. We didn't do this by ourselves. We had to and wanted to partner with all the other entities in the city, and some of them are named here. So the mission of the preserve, it seems to me, is more important than ever, more essential. In the last 50 years, the bird population numbers have declined by about 29%. In a similar time frame, the insect populations have been tanking. There have been various studies that have showed really dramatic losses of our insect population. And I really have to think that humans have something to do with that, since our population has doubled within that same time frame. So the good news is that we're positioned to be able to help reverse this. The mission of the preserve has evolved a bit over the years since I first became associated with it, but it's still focusing on the importance of the knowledge and use of native plants, serving as an educational resource for people, and an inspiration for conservation, which is great. So what can we do? As individuals, each of us can and should, if you're not, you should, be using native plants and encouraging others to do the same. We want to avoid the use of pesticides and herbicides, which are killing a lot of insects and other animals as a result. Insects are a really important source of food for birds and up the food chain. And so if insects are poisoned, there are fewer, there's less food for the other animals. And even if a bird were to consume a caterpillar that had just munched on some pesticide, it wouldn't be healthy for the bird either. So avoid those things. Make sure that you know and remove invasive species, and consider working to get the word out in your community by certifying your community through something. The National Wildlife Federation, Bird City, Tree City, pick something and use that as a vehicle for giving people more information, better information to use in making landscaping decisions. And as an organization, keep doing what you're doing and do it more and better. Continue to offer the native plant programming that you provide. Expand offerings in gardening, landscaping. It's important to try to understand the role of native plants in climate change mitigation. In Lambertville, we've started out with some native plant gardens, but we're now beginning to use native plants as a form of green infrastructure, ways to help mitigate flooding. Lambertville is super vulnerable to flooding, and plants play an important role in mitigating that. Marketing and communications is also extremely important. So make sure you get the word out of the offerings that you have here at the preserve. And just as I have, go off site to get the message out. And I know that every time we've had a native plant sale, we've had representation from the preserve. And so thank you. So why should we use native plants? Because they're essential to all life in the ecosystem in which they evolved. Oh yeah, and one more thing. I do have a blog, naturalweb.org, and that's it.
Well, thank you very much, Mary Anne. That was wonderful. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I think that's extremely impactful for people to know how others got started. Some of them are from birds. Some of them are through, water. Some of them are through the plants. It's just everybody's got their own way that they got here, and it's always nice to be able to share that and help other people understand how this can be an important cause for them as well.
I do want to emphasize that the preserve was really pivotal for me. I really learned a lot by going through naturalist training. And I now teach a number of the Knowing Native Plants classes, and some of you have attended some of them. And I try to keep that message going in the classes that I teach. So keep it up. Keep doing what you're doing. And I'll mute myself and stop sharing. See you guys. Thanks for asking me.
Thank you, Mary Anne, very much.
One of the things we take very seriously as the BHWP Board of Trustees is to make sure that we stay on top of trends, best practices, as far as the things that we do to guide the organization. So building on the retreat we held in September of 2022, this year we had a retreat in September as well, and we focused on 2 other areas that will help us become a much more strategic board, moving us away from being a more hands-on board. So 2 of the subjects that we covered was the review of the BHWP board policies, which was facilitated by Liz Viber. It really helped us take a look at all of the policies we had. We realized that a lot of them were out of date, and she helped us understand why they were so important, because if we have policies, we can streamline a lot of the things that we can do. We can alleviate some frustration, and we're all on the same page. So we're working, that's definitely something that we've aligned for, kicking off for next year, to make sure that we really dig into these policies. So out of that, the other subject that we had an IDEA overview that was facilitated by Tanya Longino, and her presentation gave the board an overview of the importance of IDEA for the entire organization and how it touches on every department, every function, every aspect of the preserve. It affects the board, it affects the staff, it affects all the volunteers. So we really got a sense of the importance of that. So what were the next steps that came out of this? We created 2 new board committees to focus on the creation of high-level board policies for these. So for IDEA, Mariah Morris, a trustee, she has agreed to chair that committee. So she'll be working with Jen Ventresca as her her staff lead to come up with a committee to help create that overarching policy. And the other one is climate change and sustainability. And Melissa Twinning Davis has agreed to chair that one. And we'll kick those all off for next year. So these are 2, I think, very important policies that we currently don't have, and 2 very important things for the organization to understand how much we can be a voice for those, and how much we can demonstrate the importance of understanding the importance of making sure that we're doing things to move the organization forward. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Pete, and I'm going to let him give you the 2023 in review, as well as a glimpse at the 2024 annual plan and budget. Pete?
All right, thank you so much, Judy. It's an absolute pleasure to be in front of all of you today again for the annual meeting. As I said earlier, it's hard to believe that we are here at the end of 2023 already. Time sure flies. The year went very quickly and was full of record-breaking activities. So I'm delighted to review the year with you, 2023, as we've accomplished so very much thanks to your generosity and your support. Now, I like to give each year a tagline. 2022's tagline was building on our successes, as we built on the lessons learned from the pandemic. In 2023, my tagline was preparing to launch, as the Preserve constructed strong foundational support in many areas, preparing us to accomplish even bigger things across the year in 2024. This year's tagline, as we look ahead to 2024, is engaging our community, as the Preserve plans to dive more deeply into community engagement outreach to new audiences, and making the preserve more inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible, IDEA, for all. First and foremost, we expanded our community events through record-breaking 1,000+ attendance at this past June's Preserve at Play Family Day, as well as with the inaugural Music in the Meadow event featuring the live music of Mukamori held at the James Moore Pavilion this past August. We invested more in education and interpretation, including the installation of 15 high-impact interpretive signs in our Moss Garden, Medicinal Trail, New Pond, and Visitor Center Garden exhibits, enhancing what we informally call the loop from the Visitor Center to the New Pond and back, as well as the expansion of promotion of our naturalist walks, an immersive way to explore and learn directly from our native plant experts. And for the first time, as Judy mentioned, the Preserve has engaged in inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, IDEA. We've engaged consultants, IDEA consultants, to bring introductory IDEA training to the staff and to the board. As a result, we have formed a new IDEA committee that Judy mentioned to explore how the Preserve can truly be a place for all. And finally, we are working with an organization called Artreach to complete a full property and program assessment focusing on accessibility. We will use their final report to guide our accessibility efforts. And I hope everyone here today got to enjoy our enhanced native plant nursery experience this year with our new checkout building and shade cloth structures. And we sold 30,000 plants again this year to our community. So stay tuned for even more enhancements to the nursery coming across 2024. Now, all of this has been accomplished during a year in which the world largely returned to pre-pandemic consumer behaviors. The world is back to in-person work, back to in-person school, and getting back to pre-pandemic habits. This has affected the labor market, which still remains very tight. In addition, visitation, membership, and program enrollment, both in-person and virtual, have all dropped off to some significance. In other words, the silver lining of the COVID bump with increased visitation, membership, and program enrollment, particularly virtual, is largely over. And the Preserve is not alone in this experience. It is an industry-wide phenomenon. Finally, inflation is still a major economic factor for us, driving our costs of goods significantly higher. For example, the nursery plant plugs that we purchase from our suppliers for nursery propagation have nearly doubled in price. So, what is ahead for 2024? I love this picture. One of our staff, Glenn White, our interim curator and assistant nursery manager, took this from our Stone Arch Bridge of Pitcock Creek. Just love it. So let's review our 2024 annual plan together as a preview for what you can expect at the Preserve next year. First, we'll dive into collections and curation. We plan to define and integrate the Preserve's position on assisted migration. Mary Anne Borge was touching on this with the sleepy orange butterfly in her presentation earlier. We will review and update our collections management plan. We will inventory, map, and assess existing signage and explore seasonal plant signs as well. You can see some of those already in our newly enhanced medicinal trail. We hope to develop trail stewardship through volunteers. We would like to also establish in-house reserve of museum collection plants so that we can propagate them for further use across the Preserve. We plan to enhance the plant database, information, and procedures for use, and we will continue to do outplanting of keystone species along our trail network. For instance, asters on the aster path and gentians on the gentian path. Next, we'll dive into development. Here we have Judy Eby, board chair, and Lynn Holtzner, our development committee co-chair, enjoying this year's Rooted in Our Future from this just last month. So for development and fundraising, we will complete a full membership program analysis. In addition, we will launch quarterly campaigns for membership, recruitment, and retention. We will host our second annual Music in the Meadow, hopefully with an event sponsor this year, as well as our fourth annual Rooted in Our Future fundraiser. We plan to create a newly enhanced planned giving program, as well as prioritizing our major donor portfolio. We plan to host one high-profile cultivation event off campus. And we will be exploring a more creative format for our annual fund campaign towards the end of 2024. We would like to secure, at a minimum, a second Preserve at Play sponsor, as well as donors for a curator salary and a new website. And finally, we hope to reinvigorate our wonderful partnerships with our garden club members. Next, for education, we have a nice image of our 2 interns this year. Very happy that they were able to join us. For education, we will be revamping our tree trail. We'll be developing a call to action that Santino will utilize in each of our education programs. And we will also be leveraging our social media, which is typically a marketing and communications effort, to enhance our education programs, such as on YouTube. We have an opportunity to provide education through our social media. Santino would like to also host a seasonal Nature at Family program, as well as our 24th, hard to believe, 24th annual Land Ethics Symposium this coming February. We are also developing an a la carte framework for school programs that aligns with the state's core curriculum. And we hope to increase the demand for our amazing guided naturalist walk program. For facilities and grounds, we will be implementing long-range planning meetings, hope to hire seasonal staff support this year in 2024. We will be also creating a plan for adding key visitor amenities in partnership with our visitor experience department. We will continue to expand and update our tracking documents, as well as a permanent solution for the sod that we replace every year at the Moore Pavilion following a very robust season of event rentals. In marketing and communications, we will be supporting a new website planning process. Yes, you heard it right. We are already diving into planning for a new website for the Preserve. We have a phase 1 planning group set aside already that has already had their first meeting. They will be helping us source a website vendor and to gather feedback of what we need for a new website from our internal stakeholders. We will send out the wonderful 8-page printed newsletter again towards the end of 2024. And we will continue to develop general and targeted social media campaigns that will support visitation, special events, and programs. We will continue using social media as well and diving deeply into creating utilizing our social media calendar for tracking and scheduling our campaigns. And we'll be scheduling a variety of social postings that include more mission-related content. Moving on to our amazing native plant nursery, we hope to complete nursery and propagation training for all of our staff. We will establish nursery staff resources as funding allows. We'll continue to invest in fern production through plugs rather than through bare root, which has proven significantly more successful for us in propagation. And we hope to expand customer educational resources, knowing that the nursery sales floor is really our main point of contact for our visitors and an opportunity to share education and outreach for them as well on the sales floor. So we hope to establish consistent cultural sheet information in our nursery checkout building, as well as other information there for our visitors and our volunteers. We will also formalize plant customer service training, as volunteers there on the sales floor are our main line of opportunity to provide education for our customers. Next, in the visitor interpretive experience plan, we would like to update our 2019 VIEP plan. We hope to host, well, we will host our 3rd annual Preserve at Play Children and Family event. We'll be looking at the admissions gatehouse to make some aesthetic improvements, since that's right at our front door. We'll implement interpretive training for staff and volunteers twice in the year. And we're going to explore adding perhaps a roofed rain shelter in Aquaton Meadow as funding allows. And as we already have funding in place, we'll be designing and installing an information kiosk just outside the visitor center. We will also look at installing safety features around Pidcock Creek to keep our visitors safe, as well as erosion on the bank to a minimum. And we hope to dive more deeply into visitor and member surveys to gain insights about satisfaction, benefits, how people use the preserve, etc. And finally, for our volunteers, we hope to establish a dedicated volunteer stewardship group to help us with our trails and gatehouse admissions, as well as completing visitor service training, plant customer service training, and propagation training, and providing 2 sessions of interpretation training for all of our visitor services volunteers, those who are helping us at the gift shop and the entry gate. We would like to establish a more robust calendar of social and special recognition events and opportunities for off-site tour programs. In addition, we would like to survey and maintain robust communications with our volunteers through the volunteer newsletter as well. Finally, we hope to update the corporate volunteer program, which provides regular, consistent group support for the preserve across the year. So now, on to our proposed 2024 budget. I'd like to talk a little bit about the goal of our budget for 2024 and the major tenets of the 2024 budget as we move forward. So the goal for the 2024 budget is to maximize charitable revenue streams while minimizing expenditures to accommodate post-pandemic impacts, which, as I mentioned earlier, include labor market pressures, the significantly increased costs of goods, inflation, and evolving consumer behaviors. So given the goals of the budgets and its context, I'll review next the key tenets or the themes of the 2024 budget. First and foremost, the 2024 budget includes no price increases. We have, as you might recall in the past, raised admissions prices, nursery plant prices, et cetera. Now, I'm very comfortable with how we are in terms of market competitiveness, and our revenue growth opportunities are rather focused on charitable giving rather than earned revenue, particularly the unrestricted funding streams of the annual fund and rooted in our future signature fundraiser. Next, we acknowledge that investment income supports the preserve's operations. The preserve regularly takes distributions from its various investment funds on an annual basis. The exception to this practice has been the Morton Building Fund, or the Morton Building Endowment, which is restricted to either building a new visitor center for the preserve or supporting the maintenance and repair of our existing visitor center. Now, the preserve has historically taken an annual distribution from this Morton Building Fund, except in the years 2019 and 2021, 2022, and 2023. Now, the reason for this hiatus was to accommodate the Finance Committee's 2020 recommendation to explore the legalities around reassigning the purpose of the restricted Morton Building Fund during the pandemic crisis to support general preserve operations rather than remaining restricted to a visitor center. But now that the pandemic crisis has abated to a large degree, the Preserve's Endowment and Finance Committees have recommended a distribution from the Morton Building Fund for 2024. Now, for perspective, the Preserve has incurred over $52,000 in qualifying expenses, not including consumable supplies, that could have been covered by the Morton Building Fund distributions during those years. One example of this is the $7,100 sewage pipe repair that we needed to do at the visitor center in 2022, which we paid for through our operational funds. This project could have been funded by the Morton Building Fund. So the 2024 budget includes a distribution from that fund. Next, The 2024 budget accommodates the industry-wide post-pandemic downward trends in visitorship that has affected our revenue from admissions and education programs. Therefore, our 2024 forecast for these revenue streams is lower than in years past. However, I will share that the consumer habit of purchasing of goods still remains strong, as it's been reflected in our Twin Leaf Book and Gift Shop, our rental program, and the native plant nursery sales, which have all continued to be very strong. And in 2024, we'll have strong goals as well. Next, the Preserve is making increased investment in community events and outreach through sponsorship opportunities. Enhanced funding will help us expand these new unique programs as they represent our outreach to new audiences that have already brought increased membership, volunteerism, and community engagement. We plan to obtain $5,000 in sponsorship for Preserve at Play. Whoops, got a little ahead of myself there. We already have an identified sponsor for that, following the hugely successful event attended by 1,000 people this year in 2023. In addition, we plan to obtain a $2,500 sponsorship for Music in the Meadow following this year's successful launch of that new event as well. We continue to invest more in our members and our volunteers over the past 2 years, following the successful digital launch of our membership program, as well as the inaugural Music in the Meadow member event in 2023. The Preserve will continue to assess the restructured membership levels and invest more in membership promotion. In addition, we anticipate accelerated success recruiting, retaining, and recognizing our volunteers following the hiring of our new volunteer and visitor services manager this past August. Now, the Preserve needs to address, as you all know, its declining infrastructure and aging equipment and vehicle fleet. Our 2024 budget includes funds for visitor center repairs, including the replacement of its heating oil tanks, window replacements in the visitor center, and upgrades to the restrooms. In addition, the budget represents a 42% increase from the 2023 equipment maintenance budget to address equipment and vehicle repairs. Next, I'm very happy to report our increased investment in grounds work has paid off. Thanks to the significant financial investment in 2022 and in 2023 to remove hazard trees throughout the property, particularly ash trees affected by the emerald ash borer, the 2024 budget includes a 56% decrease in grounds expenses now that the heaviest phase of the work has been completed. Next, and this is a big one, the Preserve aims to recoup the credit card transaction fees that we pay to credit card companies for the ability to process credit card purchases. These fees are anticipated to be approximately $30,000 across 2024. That's a large financial obligation for a nonprofit organization like the Preserve. Now, over the last couple of years, certainly since rising inflation has affected the rising costs of goods, the retail and services industries have more readily passed these costs on to the consumer through required credit card transaction fees at purchase. Of course, we will continue to accept cash and checks if visitors would like alternate opportunities for payment to avoid this fee. However, we believe we can recoup approximately $25,000 in 2024 through a required 3% fee added to most earned and charitable revenue purchases. A robust communication plan will be developed to inform visitors of the upcoming changes in advance of the January 1st effective date. Next, the 2024 budget includes 2 seasonal positions, one that is new and another that is absorbed into the operational budget after being introduced through a restricted donor gift. These positions will be focused on nursery, grounds, and visitor services support. So with all of that, I am thrilled to present a balanced budget for the board to vote upon today for 2024 of $1.25 million. And with that, I will turn this back over to you, Judy, and to walk through the votes. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Pete. That was a great overview of what happened last year, what's going to happen next year, and how we're going to pay for it. So I appreciate that. All right. So with that, I guess we can go back to viewing everybody, and we can shut down the presentation so that we can vote, if that's the best way to do that.
We will need to do a roll call, Judy, via chat, since everyone is signed on
That's
for
right, that's
webinar.
right.
Their microphones
you.
are off, so I stopped share there. So we will do roll call, and for those of you who can, please log your vote in the chat, and we will take roll call through that. So unless there's an objection, Judy, we may want to combine the two votes. But I know that Andy had recommended we keep them separate, so we can do two roll calls. I'll defer to your judgment on that.
I think we better do two because they are really important. So with that, I'd like a motion to approve the annual budget. I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Looks like Deborah can second.
Okay. So with that, I'll go down the list, and if you can sign into the chat and give your, if you're not on screen. So I'll start out with Deborah.
Yay.
Christy.
She votes yay.
Jenny.
She votes yay.
Julie.
Julie votes yay.
Judy, yay. Avetta.
That is yay.
Lisa.
Lisa is yay.
Chris.
Chris is
Juanita?
yay.
Julia.
Julia is yay.
Valdev.
Aldev, can you vote in your chat, please?
All right, maybe I'll skip over and come back to Valdev. I'll go to Gail.
Gail is a yay.
Pat.
Aldev is a yay.
Okay, great. Pat.
Pat is a yay.
Amy.
Amy is yay.
Mariah.
Mariah is yay.
Pam.
Pam is yay.
Denise.
Denise is yay.
Seth.
Seth is yay.
Andy.
Andy is yay.
Melissa.
Melissa is yay.
And Deb.
Deb is yay.
Okay, and I believe that motion was for the budget, correct? Or was that the annual plan? Sorry, I'm forgetting.
That
which
was the budget.
I
That
thought it
was the budget.
Okay, so now I'd like to make a motion to approve the annual plan. Do I have a second? Okay. So with that, we'll take the roll call again. Deborah.
Yay.
Christy. Pete, if you
Christy's
can-
yay.
Yeah, thank you. Jenny.
Jenny is yay.
Julie.
Julie yay.
Judy's a yay. Avetta.
Yay for Avetta.
Lisa.
Lisa is yay.
Chris.
Chris is yay.
Juanita.
Juanita is yay.
Julia.
Julia is yay.
Valdev.
Baldev is yay.
Gail.
Gail is yay.
Pat.
Pat is yay.
Amy.
Amy is yay.
Mariah.
Mariah is yay.
Pam.
Pam is yay.
Denise.
Denise is yay.
Seth.
Seth is yay.
Andy.
Andy is yay.
Melissa.
Melissa is yay.
And Deb.
Deb is yay.
All right. Looks like we have an approved budget for 2024 and an approved annual plan for 2024. Well done. Perfect.
Fantastic.
All right. With that, I'd like to thank all of you for joining the 2023 annual meeting. Like I said, if you have any questions or comments based on what you've heard, please feel free to reach out to either Pete or myself. I just really appreciate the fact that you joined the joined the meeting this morning. With that, Pete?
Great. Well, congratulations, everyone, for a fantastic 2023. Hard to believe, like I said, we're already in November, but looking ahead to a wonderful 2024 with all of you, and best wishes for an end of year, finishing out the Thanksgiving and the end of year holidays. And we'll be back here in January ready to dive into 2024 ahead. So thank you all for joining us here today.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You as well, Pete and Judy. And as always, my friends, keep on experiencing what's natural and learn what's native.